Technique is not your master. You will be its master. Technique and emotion must make love. Technique must be deployed in the right endeavors. God starts us from absolute zero, but eventually equips us with every conceivable faculty and tool. Consider a sheep, or any animal for that matter. It doesn't matter. Practically the moment they're born, they know more or less what to do. The human is born utterly helpless and possessing zero functional skill, yet later on, humans pull ahead by 1,000 leagues. The reason we as humanity surpass other living beings is undeniably our intellect, and consequently our mastery of nuanced techniques. A horse runs faster than me, but once I put a bridle on it, I reach those exact same speeds. Technique undeniably gives a person power and an unfair advantage, yet it must be understood that every advantage carries its own unique disadvantages, and this nuance is something most successful people completely miss. For instance, because a software engineer constantly deals with mathematical logic, their raw analytical intellect sharpens dramatically. That is only natural. Whatever a person practices, they excel at and reap the exact benefits of that craft. Generally speaking, a lawyer will be far superior in human interactions compared to an engineer. That is, setting innate individual talents aside, someone naturally gifted in interpersonal dynamics might still go on to become an engineer. However, an unused capability genuinely atrophies bit by bit. The purely mathematical reason a lawyer excels in human dynamics is that they continuously spend their time honing relational techniques. When I say interpersonal techniques, I don't mean manipulation. For example, how do you talk to a child? How does a woman or a man talk to young boys? How do they talk to a teenage girl or to a little girl? Once social status enters the equation, a wildly complex matrix emerges. For example, a male medical specialist speaks entirely differently to a young girl versus an auto mechanic peer. A master hairstylist would act completely differently under those exact same conditions. Factor in our own innate character structure, and the matrix becomes even more intricate. A shy male medical specialist will behave in one way. A confident specialist who endured severe past trauma will behave in another. A lust-driven, brilliant, yet arrogant male specialist will behave entirely differently. Speaking of human relationships, alongside foundational techniques like having a welcoming demeanor, every individual must cultivate their own distinct style. We could probably identify 15 distinct variations of putting on a friendly face. Only by synthesizing self-awareness with refined techniques can a person reach their personal summit. In all other pursuits, technique remains just as operative. I have yet to see anything devoid of technique. Even substance abusers consume their vice in dozens of varied methods. There are countless ways to marry a woman. There are countless techniques for designing an automobile, drafting an essay, shooting a basketball, talking to people, working out. Technique exists in everything. So if technique underlies literally everything, how do we develop them all? And where do we find the time? The beauty of experiencing life is that a single lived experience teaches you dozens of nuances about that craft, and not in some textbook way. You learn it in your bones. For example, if you explain intercourse to someone with impotence, they will never truly grasp what sex is like compared to someone who has experienced it firsthand. They will only have an abstract idea, and that idea will be flawed. All we can really convey to them is that it is sweet and pleasurable. We could say sex is like fruit, sweet and delightful, yet eating fruit and sexual intimacy have nothing in common aside from delivering pleasure, because their essential natures are fundamentally different. When you actively do things in life, techniques evolve naturally along the way. If there were a boxing gym without a coach where everyone took turns sparring, a raw novice would already know how to fight after just 3 solid bouts. In my view, the secret lies in correctly answering, to what level should I develop which technique? Sure. Young guy learns to fight by brawling, but eventually he will hit a ceiling. That is the exact point where elite, deliberate training and elevating the raw technique must begin. But this phase demands serious time, especially if it's a profound intellectual discipline or a refined physical skill. It demands absolute devotion. At that stage, after absorbing the higher technique, you must drill relentlessly until it becomes pure second nature. This is where truly accomplished individuals separate themselves from the herd. They essentially declare, even if not out loud, "All right, I'm dedicating a chunk of my life to this craft." You must understand 3 crucial elements: yourself, the historical moment you inhabit, and the culture you operate in, or will enter. Knowing yourself is the absolute first step. Moving without self-knowledge is just gambling, and not a skill-based gamble like poker either. It's like rolling cheap dice. If you set foot on the wrong path, every step you take, every sight you pick, and every sacrifice you make only compounds your losses, written straight into the red. Next, you need to understand the broader world. Where do things stand? What opportunities exist? And most importantly, where do I position myself? And this matter of strategic positioning is critical. If you don't deliberately choose it yourself, you're bound to run into serious trouble, because people aren't angels, as we well know. Finally, you must know the culture of where you live. or where you plan to migrate, because every single move you make will collide and interact directly with that culture. Getting yourself killed, for instance, only takes a couple of reckless sentences. Throw heavy insults online at a ruthless, volatile faction, and you successfully orchestrated your own demise. Personal success hinges on the techniques we possess, and our ability to deploy them in the right context and for the right endeavors. In the heat of a street fight, you can't say, "Hold on, let me grab a coffee." You have to stand your ground and fight through it. Possessing a technique and actually executing it are entirely different things. You might own a car, but you don't drive it. Or you drive it straight into terrible places. Everyone's definition of bad belongs to them. To some, religious environments feel repulsive. To others, dens of vice and sin feel repulsive. In this video, I simply wanted to convey that technique is power and capability once you unpack it. It branches out endlessly anyway. For example, while there are parallels between learning a language and excelling at basketball, each is acquired and executed through entirely distinct techniques, and those similarities are merely foundational principles. A handful of fundamental principles are universal anyway. Always and everywhere, the number of techniques we possess can be quantified and rationalized. One could literally tally them up. I possess 73 techniques. Techniques fall into 3 categories: intellectual, spiritual, and physical techniques, and not every technique carries equal value. We need to calculate this carefully and hone the techniques that fit us best, because if you attempt to master every single technique to the absolute end, you'll end up with 3 techniques at most in your lifetime. Yet life is vast and multidimensional. Holding so few techniques simply won't cut it.